The shaft drops 30 meters into the bedrock beneath Giza. Not through sand, through cut limestone, deliberately worked. The walls dressed clean on 3 separate levels, each chamber carved and fitted before the next one was opened below it. At the bottom, water. The third chamber is flooded, has been flooded for as long as anyone has documented it, and in the center of that flooded chamber, accessible only by wading through groundwater in the dark, there is a granite sarcophagus. It held no mummy, no inscriptions, no objects of any type recorded in the excavation notes. Just the sarcophagus, the water, and above it 2 stone lions carved into the chamber walls, facing each other across the void. The Egyptian Antiquities Organization first documented this shaft in 1934. Zahi Hawass explored its deepest level in 1999. The shaft sits beneath the causeway connecting the Pyramid of Khafre to its mortuary temple, inside the most studied square mile of archaeological ground in the world, and the chamber at its bottom has not been definitively explained. It is catalogued, it has been visited, it remains, in every meaningful sense, open. The shaft is called the Osiris Shaft. It is real, it is documented, and it is one of at least 8 major subterranean passages and chambers confirmed beneath the Giza Plateau. All of them in the published record, none of them fully explained. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Mainstream Egyptology has a complete and confident account of Giza. The plateau was developed during the 4th dynasty, approximately 2500 to 2400 BCE. Khufu built the Great Pyramid, Khafre built the 2nd pyramid and commissioned the Sphinx. Menkaure built the 3rd. The workers lived in a settlement to the south, ate well, were paid, and produced the greatest stone monuments the ancient world has preserved. Everything above ground is catalogued, measured, and understood in broad strokes. What lies below the surface is treated as settled by default, meaning the assumed answer is nothing significant, even though the actual surveys have been returning a different picture for over 40 years. Herodotus visited Egypt around 450 BCE. He was not a mystic, he was a Greek writer who traveled, questioned priests and local guides, and recorded what he was told in the same matter-of-fact register he used for battles, river courses, and trade routes. In Book 2 of his Histories, he described the plateau at Memphis with a specific detail absent from every modern tour description of Giza. He wrote that Cheops constructed underground chambers on a kind of island, forming a canal from the Nile to bring water around the island where the subterranean chambers sat. The Greek text is not ambiguous. He described not a simple burial vault, but a series of chambers on an island within the plateau's bedrock, hydraulically connected to the Nile, at a scale requiring deliberate engineering. He was not inventing this from imagination. He had sources, priests at Memphis, who held access to temple records predating his visit by centuries. What he described was an underground infrastructure of chambers fed by directed water at a scale that goes well beyond anything currently documented above or below the plateau. That account was categorized as legend for a century and a half of modern Egyptology, right up until the surveys started finding things. The detail about water is the part that holds attention longest. An underground system requiring a canal diverted from the Nile is not a casual embellishment added to make a burial story dramatic. It is a specific engineering claim about deliberate hydraulic infrastructure beneath the plateau. The Nile's seasonal flood levels, the height of its water table relative to bedrock at that longitude, the pressure tolerances of cut limestone chambers at various depths, all of these would need to be understood in the design of chambers meant to remain usable rather than permanently flooded. The people Herodotus was speaking with had preserved knowledge of that engineering in enough detail that he recorded it as a structural description, not a legend. What they told him was specific. The detail is not mythology dressed as history. It is a design specification passed down from a period that nobody has been able to confidently date. The object in the Cairo Museum labeled as the Inventory Stela was discovered by Auguste Mariette in 1858 during excavations at the Temple of Isis at Giza. The stela was carved in a formal administrative register, the type used for official temple records rather than religious poetry or royal propaganda. Its text records work commissioned by Khufu at the Giza Plateau. Inside that administrative document, there is a detail the standard chronology cannot absorb cleanly. The stela states that Khufu found the Sphinx already standing. The text records a lightning strike that damaged the monument's headdress and documents Khufu ordering restoration work on something already there when he arrived. According to the Inventory Stela, the Sphinx was not built during the 4th dynasty. It was already on the Plateau when Khufu began his reign, already old enough to show storm damage, already significant enough to draw royal resources. The orthodox response to this has been consistent since Mariette's time. The stela is considered a later composition, most likely produced during the 26th dynasty, around 600 BCE, by priests of Isis who needed to establish an ancient precedent for a temple they wanted to build near the Sphinx. The argument is that those priests attached Khufu's name to a fabricated claim in order to give their installation the weight of antiquity. That explanation carries a specific difficulty. The stela correctly names subsidiary pyramids adjacent to the Great Pyramid. It correctly references a shrine whose existence was confirmed by later archaeological work. A 6th century fabrication using Khufu's name as cover would require the priests to have had reliable knowledge of specific 4th dynasty architectural details, and then to have embedded one false claim, the pre-existing Sphinx, inside otherwise accurate content. The argument that the accurate parts were careful research and only the consequential part was invented asks a great deal of the fabrication theory. The stela does not speak only about the Sphinx. It describes the Giza site in terms that place multiple structures there before Khufu began his construction phase, structures that required maintenance rather than initial building. A plateau already containing working monuments when the 4th dynasty arrived is a plateau with a prior history. The underground shaft beneath Khafre's causeway, the anomalies the radar surveys keep finding beneath the field between the pyramids, the seismic cavity 9 meters below the Sphinx's front paws, these are consistent with the picture of a site that was in use, in some form, before the monuments we know about were placed on top of it. In 1991, Robert Schoch, a geologist at Boston University, traveled to Giza with Egyptologist John Anthony West to examine the weathering patterns on the Sphinx's body and the walls of the Sphinx enclosure. Schoch presented his findings at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America in 1992. His conclusion rested entirely on physical observation of erosion profiles visible in the stone. The Sphinx and its enclosure walls show a weathering pattern characterized by deep vertical undulations cut into the limestone face. That pattern is left by prolonged heavy rainfall, falling over many centuries on exposed stone. It is not the pattern produced by wind and sand, which leaves horizontal surface abrasion and scalloping. The vertical undulation in the Sphinx enclosure is consistent with precipitation levels that last occurred in northern Africa before approximately 5000 BCE. Schoch's analysis placed the core structure of the Sphinx in an era when the Eastern Sahara received enough sustained rainfall to produce that erosion profile over sufficient time. The Egyptological response was categorical rejection, based not primarily on geological disagreement, but on the absence of any known civilization in Egypt at that earlier date, capable of producing the monument. Schoch's position has remained stable over 3 decades. The erosion is what it is, and the question of who carved the Sphinx should follow the physical evidence, not be decided in advance of it. Thomas Dobecki, a geophysicist who worked with Schoch during the same field season, conducted seismic refraction surveys around the Sphinx using sound waves bounced through the bedrock to map density variations below the surface. In front of the Sphinx's front paws, the survey returned an anomaly. Approximately 9 meters below the surface, in a region roughly 9 by 12 meters, the bedrock responded in a way inconsistent with the surrounding limestone. The density variation was consistent with a cavity or a constructed, filled chamber. That anomaly has never been excavated. The survey that identified it is over 30 years old. It sits 9 meters beneath one of the most photographed and visited spots on Earth. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The Dream Stele stands between the front paws of the Sphinx today. Thutmose IV placed it there around 1400 BCE. The stele records that a young prince Thutmose fell asleep in the Sphinx's shadow during a hunting trip on the plateau, and the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream, identifying itself as the god Khepri, and promising him the kingship of Egypt if he cleared the encroaching sand from the monument's body, which by that point had buried it to the neck. The stele is damaged at the base. The lower portion is missing. The last fully legible lines reference stone construction work in the enclosure around the Sphinx's body. What followed in the original text, what Thutmose knew about the Sphinx's history, or about what lay within the enclosure, is in the destroyed section. What survives is an administrative record that treats the Sphinx not as a monument built within living cultural memory, but as a presence from an earlier world, something to be uncovered rather than something the dynasty that commissioned it could explain. The hieroglyphs that most directly address what may lie beneath the plateau come not from Giza, but from the Temple of Horus at Edfu, far to the south on the Nile's west bank. The Edfu building texts were carved during the Ptolemaic period, but explicitly claim to reproduce records copied from much older sources. They describe a primordial mound, a sacred island that the texts identify as the origin point of Egyptian architectural and ceremonial knowledge, where the first sacred structures were raised and from which the tradition descended to the historical dynasties. Researcher Andrew Collins, whose analysis of the Edfu texts maps their geographical descriptions against the Giza Plateau, has noted that the orientation, position relative to the Nile, and surrounding topographic details match the plateau with a specificity that exceeds general coincidence. The texts describe tunnels and chambers beneath the sacred island, sealed after the first construction phase was complete, accessible only through specific entry sequences. The vocabulary used for those subterranean elements is not ceremonial or religious vocabulary. It is the vocabulary found in Egyptian construction specifications, dimensions, orientations, material properties, sealing methods. Whether the Edfu texts are a coded description of Giza or a literary construction that happens to use architectural language is a genuinely open debate. What is not open is that they use engineering register vocabulary to describe subterranean structures beneath a geographic location whose coordinates match the plateau, in the same zone where the surveys have been finding anomalies for 40 years. In 1978, a team from Stanford Research Institute conducted a ground-penetrating radar survey of the Giza Plateau in coordination with the Egyptian Antiquities Organization. The survey was led by Lambert Dolphin and covered sections near the Sphinx, the causeways, and the open field between the three main pyramid complexes. The published summary noted anomalous readings in several locations. Near the Sphinx enclosure, subsurface features appeared in the radar data that could not be accounted for by known natural geology or any documented construction element in that area. That survey was the last comprehensive independent radar assessment of the plateau for nearly 2 decades. Follow-up surveys in the 1990s found additional anomalies, including a reading that extended from the northeast corner of the Sphinx enclosure toward the Great Pyramid in a pattern inconsistent with natural bedrock variation. None of these anomalies have been excavated or formally explained. The SRI report exists in the published literature. The anomalies it documents are not disputed. They receive no sustained attention in mainstream archaeological discussion of the plateau. The Osiris Shaft holds the picture together at its lowest level. When Hawass published his account of the shaft in 2000, he described the engineering of the three-chamber system in terms that acknowledged its unusual character. Each chamber was carved separately, to a standard of stonework consistent with the pyramid passages above ground. The flooded third chamber, worked at or below the water table, required a precision and scale of effort that exceeds what any documented New Kingdom ritual installation demanded. The granite sarcophagus at the bottom runs approximately 4 meters in length, holds no inscription, and has no parallel in any ritual Osiris context. Documented Osiris installations from the New Kingdom period, at Abydos and elsewhere, do not place uninscribed granite sarcophagi in flooded underground chambers at 30-meter depth. The shaft and what it contains sit outside the available categories. The name given to it, symbolic Osiris tomb, is a filing solution, not an explanation. What the plateau looks like from below, based on the surveys that have been conducted, is a limestone massif with extensive internal spaces distributed across multiple depths, some natural, some worked, clustered beneath the pyramid field, the causeways, and the Sphinx enclosure. Several of the GPR anomalies are large enough to constitute rooms or corridors. Several appear to relate to each other positionally, in ways that suggest connection, though no survey has been comprehensive enough to map the full interior architecture. The question of why this has not been fully investigated breaks into three distinct parts. Access to Giza is controlled by Egyptian authorities, which is entirely appropriate. These are irreplaceable sites. The question is, what research gets prioritized within that access? During the period from 2002 to 2011, excavation and survey permits for Giza were substantially controlled by Hawass. Research proposals centered on systematic subterranean survey work faced a documented pattern of delay and denial in that period. Researchers who have reported submitting applications to conduct seismic or radar follow-up in the Sphinx enclosure have described those applications being turned down without substantive explanation, though the details of those interactions are difficult to verify fully from the outside. The second factor is institutional. Egyptology has held a consistent position on Giza's dating and character for well over a century. A comprehensive subterranean survey that found large structures predating the 4th dynasty would require a revision to that position at a scope the academic infrastructure is not built to process quickly. The anomalies already documented are sufficient on their own to warrant a full survey program. That program has not materialized. The third factor is genuinely practical. The plateau is large, and the water table sits close to the surface in sections. Some of what Herodotus described, underground channels fed by the Nile, may now intersect with the modern water table in ways that make excavation genuinely complicated. That is not suppression, it is engineering difficulty. The same kind of difficulty that did not prevent the original construction. Before we go further, let me be clear about what this video is doing. This is a channel about the questions the ancient world has not fully answered, and the line between documented fact and interpretation matters here. The Osiris Shaft is real. The Inventory Stela is real and in the Cairo Museum. Schoch's geological work was presented at a peer meeting and published. The Göbekli seismic anomaly is in his published data. The SRI radar anomalies are in Dolphin's report. Those are facts. The interpretation built from them, that these anomalies collectively point toward a subterranean complex of significant scale and age beneath the plateau, is a reading of those facts. A reading grounded in real evidence, but a reading. Where this video offers a reading, I've said so, and where it reports a documented finding, I've said that too. The distinction is the channel's edge. What sits in the documented record, without interpretation added, is a set of anomalies at one of the most studied sites on Earth that have not been explained, excavated, or subjected to the full range of non-invasive survey technology now available. Muon tomography found a previously unknown corridor inside the Great Pyramid from the surface alone, without drilling. The same technology pointed at the Sphinx enclosure, the causeway, and the area above the Göbekli anomaly would map what is there without touching any of it. That survey has not been conducted at full scale. The sarcophagus is still 30 meters down in the flooded chamber. The seismic anomaly is still 9 meters beneath the Sphinx's front paws. The GPR corridor reading from 1978 is still in Lambert Dolphin's data. The Inventory Stela is still in the Cairo Museum with its claim about a Sphinx that predated Khufu. The Edfu texts still use engineering vocabulary to describe sealed tunnels beneath a sacred island whose coordinates match the plateau. And Herodotus still described underground chambers on an island fed by Nile water, recording it in the same practical register he used for everything else he had reason to believe was true. 8 subterranean features confirmed. A hydraulic description from 450 BCE that names an island beneath the plateau. A stela that places the Sphinx before the pyramids. Weathering on the Sphinx's body consistent only with a climate that ended thousands of years before Khufu was born. A seismic cavity beneath the Sphinx's front paws that a 30-year-old survey found and nothing has followed up. A shaft that drops 30 meters to an uninscribed granite sarcophagus no one can categorize. A radar reading that extends from the Sphinx enclosure toward the Great Pyramid and has never been formally addressed. None of these are fringe claims invented by people with no credentials. They are findings in the published literature, attributed to named researchers, available to anyone who looks. The strangeness of Giza is not that someone is hiding something in a deliberate and coordinated way. The strangeness is that the evidence for something significant beneath the plateau has been sitting in the open record for decades, and the comprehensive survey that could resolve it has not been authorized. The technology to look inside the anomalies exists, The non-invasive methods that worked on the structure above ground are available today. What has not happened is the decision to conduct those surveys fully, openly, and with results published before anyone decides what they should say. The shaft is still open at the bottom. The water is still there. The sarcophagus is still waiting in the dark, and whatever the anomaly 9 meters below the Sphinx turns out to be, has been waiting considerably longer. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.